Now that we have our navigation menu successfully showing us both the subjects and the related pages below the subject, I want to visit a subject called refactoring. And refactoring is basically a fancy programming way of saying we're going to improve our code. We're going to go back through our code and find ways that we can make it better, more efficient, more flexible, and more reusable. And that's what's going to make the difference between being a good programmer and being a great programmer. So let's revisit the code we just wrote and see how we can make it better. I'm going to hide Firefox. I'm going to open back up content.php. Here we are. And we have everything that we were just working on right there. Now we want to start looking at our code and looking for places where we can improve what we've already done and ways that we can make the code easier to read and reusable. First thing I notice is that we're pulling all of the subjects and we're pulling them in their natural order that they exist in the database. But that's not the effect we actually want. Right now they happen to be in the right order, but we want to ensure that by saying order by position ascending. And that's going to select them in the order of the position number. That's the effect we want. I'll copy that and we'll do the same thing for pages. It'll come right after the where statement. I'll need a space and then order by position ASC. And that'll do the same thing because our pages also have a position number. The next thing that I notice is that our query string is starting to get a little bit long here. So what if we instead put query up here as a variable and then move this entire string, I'll just cut and paste it, put a semicolon at the end, and then we can use that variable to pass into the MySQL query. Now that's a lot easier to read. Not only that, but because whitespace isn't significant for PHP or MySQL, we can actually go ahead and break this into several lines. And that query now becomes a lot more readable that way too. Another advantage is that if something were to go wrong with our query, and once we start developing complex queries, they will, we can always echo back that value to our browser so that we can check on it and see what the value that actually went in is. And that makes it nice and easy to see what was the SQL statement that you tried to execute that failed. So let's do the same thing then to our pages. Let's say query equals, and I'll grab all of this, pull it out, and we can do the same thing. We'll break it into lines so that it's more easily readable. Oops, I need a semicolon at the end. Let's make sure we get that. And then I'll take query and post it here. Now you may be wondering if it's a problem that I've reused query more than once, and it's not, and I want to show you why. Here we put together a query, and then we used it here. And the only time we use it is this one time, and from then on we're working with subject set. So the subject set is what we're really interested in, the set of rows. We're done with the query, so we can go ahead and rewrite that with this query. And the same thing is true of the second query. We're using it inside of a loop, but each and every time we're actually done with it. We've already gotten our page set, and we will have already output all of the pages because of the loop down here that outputs the pages before we get back to a new query. So we can use this query and make it disposable. And most of the time that's going to be true. If we needed to hang on to that query for some reason so that we could execute it a second time, we could have query 1 and query 2. Now when I look back at the code again, I'm noticing that we're reusing this section of code here, where we're testing to see if we got a result back successfully. And if not, we're outputting an error. And we do it twice. We do it down here again. And it seems like that's something that we're going to be doing a lot. Every time we do a MySQL query, it's going to come up for us. That seems like the perfect candidate for a function. So let's go ahead and copy that, and then let's open up our functions. I'll move over to Widget Corp and open up functions. There we are. And let's go ahead and create a function for it. Let's say function, and we're going to call this one confirm query. And the argument that we're going to pass it is going to be a result set. Or we could just say result, but I tend to say set to remind myself what's actually coming back. And then I'll just paste the code that we copied into there and take result set, the argument, and put it down here into that spot. And now we have a reusable function. We can switch back over, and we're including this function at the top of the page so we don't have to worry about it. And instead of all of this, we can now say confirm query. We don't need the not sign in front of it. We're not doing a test anymore. And all of this can go away. And we're now passing in subject set to our function confirm query. And we can do the same thing down here. We'll change this to now say confirm query. take away the exclamation point, and erase that, put a semicolon at the end. One other change that we could make here, and it's going to be a stylistic choice for you, is that we don't actually have to specify the connection. We could take this out, and it would assume the connection that we're using. You'll see a lot of programmers just leave it out. PHP does a very good job of assuming which connection we're talking about, and we don't actually have to pass that to it. So this will be very common when you're looking at someone else's code that you'll see it just like that. I'm going to go ahead and leave it in just because I'm trying to get you in the habit of some best practices, and I think it's a good idea to go ahead and leave it in there each and every time. So what else could we improve about this? Well, the code looks pretty tight as it is, but I'm thinking there might be some parts of this code that we would want to reuse in other places. So let's think about that. For example, we might want to ask for all of the subjects in other contexts. Right now we're in the staff area, but in the public area we'll want to ask for that, right? Let's go ahead and make ourselves a function that'll do all of these steps right here. It'll perform the query and return a subject set to us. I'm going to go ahead and copy all of that. We'll drop back over to our functions, and we'll start a new function. This one will be called getAllSubjects. And it won't need an argument because we're just going to say get all of the subjects. There's nothing to pass to it. There we go. And I'll paste in everything. Now, of course, because I've moved this into a function, I need to make an additional change, which is that I need to return a value out of the function. In the confirm query, I didn't need to return a value unless that statement was true. So here I'm going to return back subject set, right? And if I return it, then I'm going to have to catch it back over here. So let's go ahead and set subject set. I'm using the same variable name just for convenience. And to get all subjects, and I'm going to go ahead and just copy that, paste it over here, put in my semicolon, and then I can erase all of this. Now we have a very efficient way for us to get all of the subjects. We can do the same thing with the pages. We'll go ahead and take all of the query code, copy it, we'll move back over to our functions, and we'll do function, and we'll call this one get pages for subject, and then it's going to pass in an argument which is subject ID. We'll paste in all of our code. Just like get all subjects, we're going to need to do a return of the value page set, the semicolon after it. And then, unlike the one above, an argument is being passed in. So our code is not completely reusable. We're going to just need to make this one change here and make the subject ID be our argument now instead. So take a look at that, make sure you understand it. We'll need to go back and actually catch this back in our other code, catch the return value. I'm just going to copy the function name. I'll switch back over, and now we're going to need page set is going to be equal to the function, and we'll have to pass in a value to that function. The value we want to pass in is right up here. It's going to be subject ID, so we'll pass that value in, and now all of this code has been replaced by our function. So now take a look at that instead, and how much tighter that is, and how much clearer it is what it's actually doing. It's very clear that what we're doing is going to the database to get all the subjects and returning them to the subject set, which we then go and process through. And then we're doing the same thing for each of the pages. We're getting the page for the subject with the subject ID. It's very clear and easy to read. It's easy to work with. And all of our functions are compartmentalized in one place where we can work with them and call them whenever we want them. So I'm going to save both the content.php and I'm going to save functions.php. We'll switch back over to Firefox and let's see if it all worked. So it came back and told us that we have an undefined variable connection on line 14. And sure enough, if we come back over here, we'll look and see that we're using query that we got from here, but we're actually using connection right here. Connection has not been passed in as an argument. We could either pass it in as an argument each and every time, or we could leave it out. You remember I told you that that's perfectly permissible to go ahead and leave that out and it will assume it. Or we have a third option, which is that we can actually declare it as a global. We're talking about the global connection. And this is a case where global is perfectly appropriate. We can pull in the connection globally. We'll save our functions, switch back over, and reload, and now it works. So make sure that you understand all of those steps that we did, that you understand why it's better to refactor, that you understand how we refactored it, how we use the functions, and why we need to declare the variable global on connection in order to pull it in and use it in our query. Now that we've successfully refactored our code, we're ready to move forward and keep improving it and see if we can start to build the listings of subjects and pages into links that actually do things for us.